Hi, I'm Lisa. Welcome to my studio. So I've been doing a lot of glass fusing lately, and when I fuse glass I like to prime my shelves every time. So I find myself with a whole bunch of shelves here to prime. So I thought I would share with you how I prime my shelves. Now everybody has a different method, everybody does things differently, but I thought it might be helpful for you to see how I prime my kiln shelves. So I'm going to head over here, and I have a bucket of clean fresh water. Right here I have a bucket that I'm going to mix the primer in. My primer is pink, so the bucket's kind of pink on the inside. I have a measuring cup, a spoon, the sponge I use to clean my table afterwards, and this is called a hake brush. It's a brush that retains a lot of moisture, which makes priming easy, and it leaves very little texture, so it doesn't leave texture on your shelf after you've primed. And then down here, I have my bucket of shelf primer, which it's powder in a bag. Let me get this bucket out of the way here. And you mix the powder. I do 1 part powder to 3 or 4 parts water. It doesn't really matter what parts you use. Now I've got a whole bunch of shelves to prime, so I don't really mind making too much. I'm going to fill that up, dump that in here. I'm going to take that same measuring cup and I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, let's go ahead and do 4 scoops of water in there. And I'm going to take my spoon and stir that up. See the dry material there on the bottom? You want to get all that nice and wet. It should be the consistency of, strawberry milk. Nice and smooth, all the dry powder, oh, see, look where we got some on the bottom. Mix that up. There we go. I'll leave this here for a moment. All right, then we're going to dip the hake brush in there. And look how nicely that really retains a lot of moisture. That's terrific. So here I've got this small little square ceramic shelf. And ceramic absorbs the primer really quickly. Every time I stick this brush in there, I'm going to stir because the powder seems to separate from the water. So I'm going in different directions. And I want a nice consistent color, kind of pink color on the shelf. So I went in 3 different directions, or put 3 different coats on it. Now I'm going to prime this round ceramic shelf. It's kind of messy, but that's all right. I'm going to stir. Go in a different direction to make sure we get nice even coating. There we go. And that looks pretty good, but I kind of like the idea of just putting a 3rd coat on just to be on the safe side. There we go. All right, now this is a big 20-inch ceramic shelf. This one is going to take quite a bit of primer. So the ceramic, really absorbs the moisture, and you really want a nice even coating to ensure that your glass doesn't stick. So a lot of people use shelf paper instead of priming their shelves, and that's terrific. But the nice thing about the primer is it's the least expensive way to prevent your glass from sticking to the shelf. It's easy to do. You don't have to vacuum the shelf afterward like you do with shelf paper. It's less expensive than shelf paper. Oh, look at that. I'm getting really messy here. And, if you're doing a bunch of shelves at one time, it's not really a hassle. It's actually kind of, therapeutic, as long as you don't mind getting a little messy. Now, if the primer at any time starts to drag, that generally means I need to add a little more water, because it's kind of getting dried up. There we go. Look at how beautiful that is. What a nice color. Nice coating, even coating there. All right, now this shelf here is fiberboard. Same size as that ceramic one, but fiberboard, I use that in the event that my ceramic one needs to be primed. I could use this fiberboard one. I could use it. One of the projects we recently made was 20 inches across, so I needed to use this big shelf. And then the next day we had another big project, so I really needed both of these back to back. So rather than prime and wait for this to dry, I just pull out another shelf. The advantage to the fiberboard shelf is it's lightweight, so it's much easier to move around. Disadvantages, I generally don't assemble a project on it and move the kiln shelf and the project to this kiln because I worry the shelf won't be able to support its own weight and support the weight of the glass. This shelf, because it's porous, it absorbs the moisture a little bit quicker. And I still want to give it 3 nice even coats. Let's mix that up. Now the fiberboard shelf I generally leave on the table until it's, overnight, until it's dry, because it's a little more fragile when it's wet. It's kind of like trying to move a gigantic wet sponge. This is starting to drag a little bit on me, so I'm going to go over here and add a tiny bit of water to this. Sometimes as it starts to kind of get to the bottom of the primer, it gets a little stiff. Kind of like cake batter that is getting dry. There we go. See how beautifully that's going on now? Look how it absorbs right away. So I go in different directions on purpose to make sure I get nice even coating. And I'm looking for a uniform color. And by putting 3 coats on, I'm sure that my glass will not stick. So if the glass doesn't stick, that protects my kiln shelf and it protects my glass. So I'm not going to have enough here to do these last 2 shelves, so I have to go mix up a little bit more. So let's just put that right there. Come back over here. Primer's getting down to the bottom of the bag. Oh, look at this mess I'm making. I'll pour this in here. Now we're just going to go for it. Because I always have shelves to prime.
Could you store it in the water or will it go bad?
Yeah, that's a great question. Can I store it in the water or will it go bad? Truthfully, I don't really care for it after it's been stored in the water. It kind of dries up more when you're using it. So I prefer to mix fresh, prime, and then if I have a little extra and I can work with it tomorrow, great. But if it's going to sit around for a couple weeks, I'd rather not work with it. I would rather try to make less and use up everything that I have. Because it kind of, I'm going to get that last little bit out of there because it's all important. There we go. We don't want to waste any. So yeah, I try not to let it sit around because it tends, the powder tends to separate from the water and it just doesn't go on as smooth. So I would prefer to mix small batches, and if I have a little bit extra, I might take, oh wait, I left my brush over there. If I have a little bit extra, I might use it to prime some molds that look like they're in need of some primer. So I prime my kiln shelves that I'm going to use for full fuse every single time I use them. If I'm using a mold, I'm going to turn this so you guys can see it. If I'm using a mold, I only prime it when the mold shows signs of wear. And the reason for that is the mold is used at a much lower temperature. A mold is used at 1265. These kiln shelves go up to sometimes as high as 1600. So I want to make sure that primer is fresh and new. So if I have a little extra, I'll look around and see, hey, this mold looks like it could use a little primer. Let me use up the rest of the primer on that just to empty the bucket. Ooh, look at that. There we go. Making a pretty good mess on my table. That's all right. I probably have it on my shoes. Oh, and I have it down my pant leg. And all over my arm. You can see that. So I like to paint my tops of my tables every, I don't know, about every year or so. So after I get these done and dry, I'm going to go back with a wet sponge and clean off my table. Oh. And that's the end of our filming window. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing how to prime shelves. And I hope it's helpful for you to see how I do it in my studio and help you to figure out how to do it in your studio. And again, fiber paper is great, but priming is terrific. It's therapeutic. It's less expensive. And you get to use the shelves right the next day. So thanks for joining me. Please check out my website and you become a member and like, subscribe, follow. And until next time, happy fusing.